Remember the 1970s. The icons who defined our youth weren't always who they seemed. Imagine discovering that the gold medalist on your Wheaties box, or the child star you watched every week, was fighting a private battle for decades. For many, these changes feel sudden, but they are actually stories of immense sacrifice and a lifelong search for peace. Today, we're looking at 35 transgender celebrities who stepped out of the shadows to live their truth. We'll revisit the familiar faces you grew up with, showing their incredible transformations and revealing one legendary Hollywood name at the end that you truly won't see coming. For those of us who lived through the summer of 1976, that image of the quintessential American hero is burned into our memories. We sat by our television sets as Bruce Jenner dominated the decathlon in Montreal, setting a world record and pioneering that iconic victory lap with the stars and stripes held high. To our generation, Jenner was the world's greatest athlete, the smiling face on our morning Wheaties box, and the very definition of traditional masculinity. But as we later learned, that celebrated image was a mask. While we saw a man at the pinnacle of physical strength, Jenner was privately navigating a struggle most of us couldn't have imagined at the time. In a landmark 2015 interview with Diane Sawyer, a broadcast many of us watched with a mix of curiosity and surprise, Caitlyn revealed she had actually begun hormone treatments way back in the 1980s. She had even developed physical changes before the weight of societal expectations, and her marriage to Kris Jenner led her to stop and even undergo surgery to remove breast tissue to fit in again. For the next 30 years, she lived a dual life, playing the roles of husband, father, and icon, while feeling utterly disconnected from herself. When Caitlyn finally introduced herself to the world at age 65, it wasn't for publicity. It was the end of a long, exhausting silence. For many of us, it was a moment that challenged our perceptions, but ultimately, her journey reminds us that no amount of gold medals can replace the peace of finally living an honest life. Many of us first became acquainted with Laverne Cox when she appeared on our television screens as Sophia Bursay in Orange is the New Black. There was a quiet dignity and a relatable strength in her performance that made her stand out, but her actual life story is arguably more compelling than any scripted drama. Born in Mobile, Alabama, Laverne was raised in the heart of the Old South, an environment where traditional values were the bedrock of the community. For a child grappling with gender identity in the late 70s and early 80s, the world could be a very cold place. Laverne has since shared the heartbreaking reality of that time. At just 11 years old, she attempted to take her own life because she felt overwhelmed by a society that didn't have a name for who she was. It is a sobering reminder of the silent battles many children of that era fought alone. Her journey toward her true self truly began when she moved to New York City to pursue her passion for the arts. In the freedom of the city, she began the long, courageous process of transition. A fascinating detail from her career that many of us found moving was that her own twin brother, the musician M. Lamar, actually played her character's pre-transition self on television, a rare moment of family supporting art and identity. In 2014, we saw her make history as the first openly transgender person on the cover of Time magazine. That transgender tipping point cover signaled a major cultural shift in America. For our generation, Laverne Cox represents more than just a Hollywood success story. She is a testament to the fact that resilience and honesty can eventually lead to the respect and peace we all deserve. It's hard to forget the moment back in 2007 when we first met Jennings. She was just 6 years old, sitting across from the legendary Barbara Walters on 2020. For many of us, that interview was a watershed moment. It was the first time we'd ever seen a child speak with such absolute clarity about being transgender. While most kids her age were focused on toys and games, Chaz was calmly explaining that she had a girl's brain in a boy's body, a phrase that helped many of us finally begin to understand her experience. What really resonated with me, though, was the response of her family. Her parents, Jeanette and Greg, were navigating uncharted territory during an era when there was no roadmap for raising a transgender child. Rather than following the rigid social expectations of the time, they chose a path of unconditional love and advocacy. They even co-founded the Trans Kids Purple Rainbow Foundation to support other families in similar shoes, showing a level of courage that is truly admirable. We have essentially watched Jazz grow up on our television screens through her series, I Am Jazz. She has been incredibly brave in sharing the real side of her journey, not just the triumphs, but also her struggles with mental health and the physical complexities of her transition. Her story reminds us that authenticity isn't always something you find after decades of searching. Sometimes it is a truth a child carries from their very first steps, waiting only for the world to greet it with a little compassion and understanding. For those of us who tuned in to the Sonny and Cher comedy hour in the early 1970s, Chaz Bono was a face we felt we knew intimately. We remember that adorable blonde child with the bowl cut appearing on stage, the very picture of Hollywood royalty. To us, he was Chastity, the cherished daughter of America's favorite duo. But while we were laughing along with the comedy skits and enjoying the music, Chaz was beginning a long, painful journey of self-discovery that would eventually play out under the harshest spotlight imaginable. One detail many of us might recall is that Chaz actually first came out as a lesbian in the mid-1990s. At the time, many thought that was the end of his story. However, as Chaz later revealed, he was still living in a body that felt like a misinterpretation of who he truly was. In 2008, at age 39, he made the courageous decision to begin his gender transition. It wasn't an easy road. Even his mother, the legendary Cher, was remarkably candid in interviews, admitting that she initially struggled with the change, mourning the daughter she knew even as she supported the son he was becoming. When Chaz competed on Dancing with the Stars in 2011, he faced intense public scrutiny, yet he handled it with a steady, quiet dignity. His journey reminds us that true peace doesn't come from fame or meeting the expectations of a global audience. It comes from the bravery to finally be comfortable in your own skin, no matter how long it takes to get there. For those of us who value service and tradition, Fallon Fox's story begins in a way that feels very familiar. She grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and served in the United States Navy as an operations specialist. Like so many of our neighbors and friends, she tried to walk the path society expected. She married, had a child, and lived a life that appeared disciplined and conventional on the surface. Yet as we've seen with so many of these pioneers, the surface rarely tells the whole story. Fallon lived with an internal conflict that most people of that era simply didn't have the vocabulary to understand. When she finally chose to live as her true self, she didn't find immediate support. Instead, she faced the heartbreaking rejection of family members who pressured her to suppress who she was. For many of us, that kind of family tension is a painful, relatable reality of a bygone era. In 2013, Fallon stepped into a different kind of arena, becoming the first openly transgender athlete in professional mixed martial arts. I remember the national debate that followed. It was all over the sports pages and news broadcasts. From ESPN to local papers, people were arguing about biology fairness and the very definition of competition. She faced immense public scrutiny and intense criticism from some of the biggest names in the sport, like Joe Rogan. But Fallon didn't back down. She showed us that while it takes physical strength to compete in a cage, it takes a much deeper, more profound courage to stand firm in your truth when the world is shouting at you to hide. Her journey reminds us that true bravery is ultimately the refusal to be anyone other than yourself. For those of us who remember the evening news in the 1990s, the images of the Bosnian War and the suffering in places like Tuzla are hard to forget. It's deeply moving to realize that Andreja Pejic, a face now synonymous with high-fashion glamour, spent her early childhood in a refugee camp during that very conflict before finding safety in Australia. That kind of survival instills a resilience you simply cannot teach. Many of us first noticed Andreja around 2010 or 2011. Back then, the fashion world was mesmerized by her androgynous look. I recall the stir she caused when she modeled both men's and women's lines for Jean-Paul Gaultier, even famously closing his couture show in a breathtaking bridal gown. At the time, the media treated her as a fascinating novelty, but for Andreja, it was a complicated compromise. She later told People magazine that she had actually known she was a girl since age 13, but she hid it to help her family survive and succeed. In 2014, she decided to stop playing a role. She publicly transitioned, telling Vogue in what was a landmark 4-page spread that she needed to be true to herself. She feared the transition might end her career since her brand was based on being between genders. Instead, she found a new level of success, proving that authenticity has its own power. Her journey reminds us that true peace doesn't come from being what others want to see. It comes from having the courage to define yourself on your own terms. For over a decade, many of us likely saw Geena Rocero's face in our favorite department store catalogs or swimsuit ads without ever knowing the remarkable journey she took to get there. Born in Manila, Geena was a superstar in the Philippines' vibrant transgender beauty pageant circuit, where she was affectionately nicknamed Horse Barbie because of her long, graceful stride before moving to San Francisco as a teenager to pursue the American dream. By 19, Geena had undergone gender-affirming surgery, a milestone she has described as a profound moment of alignment. When she later moved to New York City, her modeling career skyrocketed. She became a sought-after face for major American brands like Macy's and Hanes, but for 12 years, she lived what is known as a stealth life. She was admired by millions, yet she lived in constant fear that her history would be exposed and her hard-earned career would vanish in an instant. The moment that changed everything was her 2014 TED Talk. It was an incredibly brave move. She stood on that stage and shared her truth with the world, risking her entire livelihood to stop hiding. She chose to trade the safety of silence for the power of advocacy. Since then, through her organization Gender Proud and her 2023 memoir, she has become a global voice for dignity and immigrant rights. Geena's story is a beautiful reminder that while professional success is a blessing, the greatest achievement of all is the freedom to live an honest life. For many of us who enjoy a good reality competition, we first met Carmen Carrera in 2011 during the 3rd season of RuPaul's Drag Race. She was undeniably captivating, but as we soon learned, she was standing at a major crossroads in her life. Shortly after the show aired, Carmen made the brave decision to stop performing in drag and began her journey to live openly as the woman she had always been. What I find most admirable about Carmen isn't just her success in the fashion world, but her willingness to stand her ground when it mattered most. Many of us might remember the 2012 controversy involving the popular show Cake Boss. When the program used her as part of a prank and employed a transphobic slur, Carmen didn't just stay quiet to protect her career. She spoke out publicly, demanding an apology and better treatment for the transgender community. To see someone challenge a major network for the sake of dignity, even when it was risky, showed a level of grit and character that is truly commendable. Her career since then has been nothing short of historic. She moved from reality TV to the highest echelons of fashion, being photographed by the legendary Steven Meisel for a stunning spread in W magazine. I also recall the massive public petition in 2013 signed by nearly 50,000 people calling for her to become the first transgender Victoria's Secret angel. While that specific milestone hasn't happened yet, her journey reminds us that true growth often requires us to leave behind the roles we were assigned to find the life we were meant for. Carmen's story is a testament to the power of self-respect. Beyond every gold medal, hit show, or fashion cover lies a private battle that the world rarely sees. Whether it is Caitlyn Jenner's Olympic legacy or Laverne Cox's resilience, these stories prove that true courage is not found in applause or fame. It is found in the quiet, difficult choice to live truthfully. For those of us who have watched the world change over the decades, These journeys offer a vital lesson in compassion and the importance of listening before we pass judgment. We have learned that lasting peace does not come from following a script written by others, but from finally embracing the person within. If there is one thing these lives teach us, it is this. It is never too late to start your own chapter and become the person you were always meant to be. Thank you for joining us today. If you found these stories moving, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss a new video. We look forward to seeing you in the next one.